Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth George, Director of Member Engagement and Chapter Development with the American Guild of Organists. And I'm so pleased to invite you today to a very special webinar, Returning to the New Normal, Identifying Recovery Processes and Taking the Time to Grieve. Before I introduce our wonderful presenters, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes. This is being recorded, as all of our webinars are, and it will be uploaded with a link on our website probably within the next 24 hours. And I will be sure to send out an email with the link to all of you and the handout. You are muted, but we do want to hear from you. We want to have a very vibrant conversation because we know that you will have a lot to add to what will be discussed today. So please put your questions and your comments in the Q&A icon that is located at the bottom of your screen. So let me tell you a little bit about our presenters. Sally Powell is Director of Worship Arts at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Dayton, Tennessee. She is a worship leader, an artist, a clinician, and coach. And for over 20 years, she has influenced church congregations, concert goers, private students, collegiate classrooms, and communities. Her gifts have been applied in diverse roles: performing artist, guest worship leader, private vocal coach, studio owner, and collegiate chorale conductor. Common to all is her passionate commitment to artistic excellence and intergenerational influence. Love for music and the people who make it have guided Christopher Cook into shaping a very unique post-retirement career, focused on articulating the pastoral dimensions of music ministry for a new generation. I'm sure you know many of him. He's a teacher, but he also writes columns for the American Organist magazine, and he has touched the lives of many of us locally and nationally at the AGO. And we're also very blessed to have him serving as Dean of the San Diego chapter. In 2003, Chris responded to a call to explore the theological foundations of the arts role in worship, enrolling in doctoral studies at the Robert E. Weber Institute for Worship Studies. He's Director Emeritus at the Rancho Bernardo Community Presbyterian Church, where he teaches and performs. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Christopher Cook.
Yes, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be able to share this with you today. We have spent some time in reflection, all of us, about what has been yet is not completed, which is the COVID pandemic. No one has escaped the effects of this horrible thing. All of us have been changed. All of us have been challenged. All of us have given up a great deal. All of us have known many people who have suffered alongside us in our ministries and in families and among our friends. We all have suffered a great deal of loss. Our lives have been changed. Each of us has an individual story that we can share about our own lives, and yet we share all of this experience as a group of people, a group of chapter members, a group of sacred musicians, citizens of the world. We all share in that kind of experience. And so today, what we want to do is we want to begin to unpack a process by which we can reflect upon our experience, acknowledge the changes that have taken place, and position ourselves for a life of post-pandemic excellence filled with hope and a plan for the future based upon the changes that we have gone through together and separately. And so one of the things that we must remember as AGO members is that we are in a leadership position in our churches, in our families as well. And so it's important for us to take care of ourselves because others are depending upon us for their nurturance, for a word of hope, for a twinkle in the eye that it will all be okay. And it's important for us to be positioned in our personal lives by doing our own work, the kind of work we're going to talk about today, as we work toward lifting others in the same kind of work that we are doing ourselves. And so today we are founding our conversation on an article that was published just this month in the American Organist called Child's Play, which I wrote for my own chapter in April. And so in finding the article, Elizabeth suggested that we would follow what was detailed as the 6 R's of recovery. And so we're going to use that as a framework for the conversation that we have today. And so the 6 R's of recovery starts out with relive it. And of course, that means that we must remember what it was like back more than a year ago when things shut down, when things were very dire, when we were filled with fear. And we're not done with the pandemic yet, but we certainly are approaching a better place. So it is safe for us to relive some of those memories, to face some of the pain and some of the losses. And in that, taking a step forward with hope. And so we want to start there. And Sally has some marvelous perspectives she'd like to share as a part of our conversation.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I think that, well, what you wrote in your article was that grief is a path out of pain. And I loved the way that you phrased that. And I think that one of the things that we artists have in common, particularly church musicians, is that we bore a lot of others' grief on our own shoulders, even as we tried to carry our own. And this was true for some of our companions in other industries like education and other areas of pastoral ministry. But I think we need to stop as a group, our unique audience today, and just acknowledge that a lot of us just really had to step up. We had to suddenly try to continue what we were doing in our areas of music and worship ministry, but in a completely different format. We were trying to continue to reach out to people with the comfort that sacred music provides. And yet we didn't necessarily have the luxury to process these things on our own. And so today, one of the beautiful things that we can do as this small community that's gathered this afternoon is to actually take a moment and begin to name some of our own losses. So perhaps some of you that have joined us this afternoon have already done this, but I think this first step, which Chris called relive it, is a wonderful opportunity for us to just take a moment and ask ourselves, what did COVID bring into my life that I would count as a loss? What kind of grief came to me because of this season that none of us anticipated, but we've all had to cope with? And I think one of the important things to acknowledge right off the bat is that, trauma is not necessarily an event, a specific event. Trauma is our body's physiological response to a stimuli. And so it can be, and it often is, and I don't in any way want to minimize or confuse the issues that surround very real circumstantial trauma, such as abuse and terrible, natural disasters and things like that. But long-term sustained stress can provide the same kinds of physiological responses in us, just as humans. And if we haven't taken a moment to just acknowledge that our bodies, our emotions, our spiritual health has taken a toll, I think that we're in danger of missing an opportunity to actually deal with and grow through some of the things that COVID brought along. So I just encourage all of us, if you haven't taken a moment to name your losses, I guess that would be my first encouragement based on Chris's encouragement to relive this. Take a few moments. It's not going to happen right now in this moment on this webinar, but carve out a few moments sometime in the next day or two and just take a piece of paper and a pencil and start listing the things that you would count as losses. And don't minimize those. Don't come to it and try to filter it through a grid. Don't compare it to other people and measure your losses against your perception of other people's losses. Just simply sit there and open up your heart and your mind and ask yourself, what have I lost? And name it. I think that's a really critical place to start.
Well, and in thinking with you about these kinds of critical losses, I want to just keep it real in the sense of grounding our conversation in experiences that we know about. Here in San Diego, in the San Diego chapter, our civic organist, who is responsible for one recital a week on Sundays, literally performed, he planned, rehearsed, performed, filmed, and edited 58 consecutive performances. It's an unbelievable thing. And he plays everything by memory. So there's that complete overwork kind of exhaustion that has taken place. And many of us were thrown into situations where we had to suddenly learn how to record and produce services so that the church community could continue meeting online. In my own church, the director of worship there, exhausting work, and all of us have worked to our very best capacity and beyond. Another kind of emotional exhaustion that we're using as examples to people's memories here is that some people completely lost their work.
Yes.
And we're not prepared for dealing with it.
Yeah.
Who is? Some people had hours reduced. Some people had nothing left. And so the fear, the turmoil, the disruption, the anger, the disappointment, the despair, and the sense of hopelessness is another completely different kind of exhaustion that we have among us. And as we said at the beginning, each of us has a story, but each story is unique. So I've tried to cover the range of possibilities from complete loss to complete overwork, using the same term exhaustion as a way of describing the kind of disruption and the kind of emotional effect that it has happened. And many of us have not had a chance yet to deeply rest.
Absolutely. And some of us are grieving the actual loss of life. We've lost people. Some of us have lost people who are very close to us personally in our families. Some of us have lost colleagues to this condition. And some of us have lost, I have friends who work in musical theater who have lost their careers because of the long-term effects of post-COVID syndrome. It's a real thing, and we don't actually know what's happening with long-term lung damage, with long-term damage to vocal cords and to our body mechanisms. People have lost their stamina, their ability to be physically active, and yeah, it is very close to home. I have colleagues who lost their jobs completely. I have two colleagues who have worked in academia, and the departments just closed down, and they lost their positions and are seeking other placements. And you're absolutely right. And it ranges from those things which are big and valid and obvious, all the way down to things that might not trigger at first blush, but I've thought about even in my own ministry. So as we've started doing things again, here we are in 2021, and I can remember distinctly as we were approaching the Lenten season, and back in January of this year, as I was looking ahead and starting to make plans, I habitually forgot about the year 2020. You know how you do, you're choosing music, you're talking about things, you're looking at the calendar, and I'm thinking to myself, or even saying aloud to other people, oh yeah, last year we did XYZ, or and I'm realizing, no, that wasn't last year. Last year we were all shut down. That was 2019. And we've literally lost, in some ways, a full year. We've lost the ability to, we mark our time liturgically in seasons, and when we didn't have the opportunity to mark those in the ways that have been meaningful to us in the past, it's like a big gaping hole of lost time. And I've actually grieved that. I thought, my goodness, this is crazy. And the interaction then with volunteers in our ministries, high school choirs. This is true in schools and in churches, but high schoolers who were involved lost that opportunity because everything shut down, and now they've moved on and their lives are being lived at other places. They've moved to university, and that chapter is closed. And so I think there are a lot of things. I also think, for all of us, no matter where we are geographically, no matter what our surroundings are as we work as artists, we've experienced the tension of public opinion and people close to us holding different opinions. The science is all over the map, and we're not sure who to trust and what we should think about everything from should we vaccinate to should we wear masks, and how far apart should our seats be, and when is it safe for choirs to sing again, and when can we do all of these things. And all along the way, we've had to continue working while juggling that. And I just want to say, some of us have lost relationships. And I will just say that even personally, that's something that has happened in my own life, in my sphere of influence, because of disagreements over these things, and trying to navigate how do you continue to function when none of us really know.
Well, and we keep learning, don't we?
Yes.
Sally, I was just thinking back to my own story, which is its own unique thing. And as we said, everybody does have a unique story. And a part of the process that we're talking about today is really to look at ways in which we can encounter our experience, and to grieve it, to relive it, and to grieve it. And a couple of suggestions come to mind. One of them is that because storytelling creates wholeness in the telling of the story, some people are really deeply helped by journaling, by writing the story out, perhaps just a memory or two at a time, with no concern for sequence, but just what comes up. And another way of releasing or having our story is to be heard by having a friendly ear that is able to listen without judgment, to listen with compassion. So if you have a friend like that, it could be an invaluable way in which we can really relive and let go of, which is the second step that we're going to move to. We're going to release the memories. We're going to release the emotions. We're going to let go of its effects as best we can. There is so much to be said about the process of release. I'll just say that in my own life, I think that the primary word that guides me through this kind of process is the word surrender. To let go through breath, through relaxation, to remember, but to let it go as something from the past. Do you have other thoughts about how to go about doing that?
I do. And I love what you were talking about a moment ago, the gift of friendship and sharing our stories, the sensation that we need to be heard. And I will say that is a rare gift indeed. And if you
Yes.
have someone like that in your life, that is amazing. And I hope that you will take advantage of that. But I would be remiss if I didn't stop here and just acknowledge that we are all fallible. Our creativity, our compassion, our stores of emotional health are finite. We are not God. And so I hope that that all of us will free ourselves from any preconceived notions or stigma that might surround the idea of seeking professional help. please, 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 if you find yourself struggling, and especially if you think to yourself, I should name this or I should give this some time, and you're having trouble even getting started, these might be signs that your body is still in shock from all that you have absorbed, and you may need some help professionally. So trust those who have been trained to deal with these kinds of things. Seek out a professional counselor. One of the neat things that's come out of COVID is that there are so many opportunities to receive quality, confidential, professional mental health guidance through resources online. So it's much more affordable and it's much more accessible than it ever has been before. So I just encourage you to consider reaching out to find a licensed therapist that might be able, just even in just a few sessions, to help you walk through a process so that you can be further down the road. You don't have to do this alone. That's what I really want to encourage everybody. Self-care is a term that's kind of been thrown around for a while, even pre-COVID. And so some of us, myself included, I almost roll my eyes a little bit when I hear it now. Yeah, self-care. But let's just take a moment and recognize how vital that is. For artists, I think it's really critical that we recognize, we artists, we are sensitive people, right? And we feel things deeply. This is why we can communicate using this language of music. And this is why we can touch audiences and congregants and move their hearts. It's a language that we speak, but we feel it deeply. And that sensitivity leaves us vulnerable. And so if we don't take care of that, we can become extra hurt. Our wounds can stay with us for a long time. So I guess I would encourage talking to a friend, a colleague, someone you can trust, maybe a professional therapist. But I would also encourage you to stop and just ask yourself, in all of the flurry of trying to continue to generate income and trying to deal with new technology, to deal with the fact that we've lost our venues and our ability to perform live music, and now that we all are trying to weather an ongoing season of transition back to some of the things that we enjoyed before, are you taking care of yourself? So, this is the mom in me, but I'm just going to go there. Are you sleeping? Are you getting sleep? Are you giving yourself the gift of physical movement? Just taking a walk, getting yourself moving, especially if you can do so in nature in some way. Go to a park, look at the sky, find some place with a distant horizon so you can, rest your eyes in the middle distance and take some deep breaths. Whatever you need to do, make sure that you're finding that. And I will also just say, please remember that art feeds art. And a lot of us have been giving, my grandma used to say, you can't draw water from a dry well. Well, some of us need to replenish our creative stores. And I think we're probably going to touch on some of those things later on in Chris's list. But even right here, I just want to encourage you, if you need to, just grab a ticket to the museum. Things are opening up again, and go walk around an art museum and just let yourself breathe. Go walk through a sculpture garden, look at some beautiful things, and let other forms of art feed your musical art as well.
You have done such a beautiful job of describing this very stage. And I think the overall goal is for us to be able to move from the paralysis of unprocessed memory into a place of Sabbath rest.
Absolutely.
So if we can let go of all of these memories, if we can let go of the pain, I found myself in paralysis through a great deal of this. I just can't get anything done. I don't know what to do. I don't feel like doing it. It's a terrible place to be. And as I've worked on myself on this, I just think that I finally have begun to find a place where I can let that go, forget about it, and turn toward a place where I can actually get the kind of deep rest that I need and that we all need. So let's remember that a part of the part of the faith is to provide ourselves what the Lord has given us, which is a day of Sabbath, a day of deep rest where we can renew spiritually and have a chance to see things from a different perspective. And in doing so, it gives us a chance to do what we call the third step, which is to revision our experience. We're called to the ministry of sacred music. That's very clear. And we're reflecting on the situation that we find ourselves in now. So what do we need to adjust? What are the new circumstances that we find ourselves in? My church is very different from what it was a year and a half ago. And I'm sure I'm not the only person to return to live worship to discover that. And nobody knows that better than the people who are planning worship and in negotiating even new job position descriptions based upon new needs. And so I think it's really important for us to out of the rest, out of the letting go, to have a chance to rethink, to look at new possibilities, to find ways of including what we have gained, what we have given up, and to find new ways of developing a perspective that will help us to move forward.
Absolutely. I think one of the important things that we can do is to ask ourselves, what has COVID given us? So not things that we have done or sort of become scrappy and hung on and survived in spite of COVID. Is it possible that there are things that this experience of this pandemic and all that's wrapped up around it, is it possible that there are gifts that have been given to us because of this? So I'll give you a concrete example that's very unique to my small ministry here in Southeast Tennessee. I minister in a lovely small church, and before COVID, there was just a resistance to the utilization of some technologies. And I'll confess to you, some of that resistance was mine. But then all of a sudden, here's COVID. And because we're adjusting and trying to maintain communications, contact, the beautiful corporateness of our worship, and we're trying to do this utilizing technology, suddenly those barriers were dropped. And we learned that we can communicate like we are this afternoon. I feel like I'm here with all of you, even though I don't see all of your faces on the screen right now. And this is lovely. We have community, and we're learning how to experience community in an entirely different way. And I think this is one of the gifts that COVID has given us. So as we move forward, not just in church ministry, for sure, in areas of sacred music, but in other areas of our life as artists as well, this is going to be a new reality ongoing, a gift, I hope, but definitely something new, even in public performance of the arts. Will we see ongoing much more utilization of live streaming of concerts, of even just the preserving of concerts? How will people share in different ways? How can we bridge geographical divides? And we've seen that just brilliantly done with, virtual choirs and orchestras and all kinds of things. The idea and the spirit of collaboration is very different. And I think it's exciting to consider what gifts came out. And so I referred to this one area of technology. It just, because COVID restricted what we could do physically, even when we started to gather again in person, at the beginning of regathering, we were hesitant to use printed liturgies, bulletins or worship folders, things of that nature. And so we utilized our screens a lot more than we ever had previously in my, church context. And then we started to discover that we could utilize that technology ongoing in a way that enhances our ministry. And it was something that I don't think our congregation would have bridged or embraced nearly as quickly or readily had we not had the gift of a shutdown and been forced to embrace technology in a different way. So that's just one of the gifts. I think another one we could think about is in the area of community. in my congregation, like I said, I'm in a small community, and we all felt like we knew each other. But life is life, and you get really busy. And suddenly, with this shutdown, we had to be much more deliberate about how we engaged each other, how we checked on one another, how we helped one another. You drive by and you drop off some soup, or can I go pick up some groceries for you? Or, all the myriad ways we were taking pictures and sharing with one another in small groups and in Zoom meetings and so forth. And we actually created deeper bonds as a community because of COVID that are now servicing us as we're back in person. And I think these are gifts. So I would just challenge the rest of our community today that's gathered to think about that in your own setting. As you revision your ministry, what kinds of gifts has COVID brought?
Out of the depth of the struggles and the grief that we share, out of that depth, while we're in the moment processing and surrendering all of that, there can be glimmers of new things. And I think you have outlined two really happy ending stories about the question that I actually asked my focus group just a couple of days ago. They didn't know they were the focus group that thought we were gathering for lunch. But I asked all 7 people to share with me this 2-part and the answer in their own life, this 2-part question. What did you lose in this experience? And what have you gained? Is there something that you have gained as a result of the loss or from your experience? And you've just given us 2 really beautiful examples of how that has happened. Drawing closer in community is probably the most unexpected outcome of social isolation I could imagine. It's truly a paradox to think about. But we have never been consistent with a music ministry newsletter, but I tell you, we did not miss a week, right? Treasured Zoom rehearsals where people could share what they were going on is the only way to keep community together. I ended up writing a weekly interview with 1 or 2 choir members called a choir cameo. And we have the most interesting people in our choir. We all do, but almost no time is given over to really get to know these people because we're busy with our rehearsal schedules and the pressures of performance most of the time. So here's a 600 word bio about somebody who did things that nobody knew. And so the bonds are closer as a result of that kind of work in community. And I know that everybody here has an answer to the question, what did you lose? And our purpose is to help prime that question. Maybe we haven't quite turned to the question, what have I gained? But in your own time, I know that from deep within, those answers are going to start coming forth if they haven't already come forth now. And in finding those answers, it really is the chance for us to move to our next point, which is to renew ourselves, to renew our call, to renew our experience, and to watch for what is emerging, for new understandings, for new what's unfolding, new truth that has come about who I am as a person. Who we are as ministers, who we are as a community, who we are as a chapter. We have some new insights into who we are as a chapter here in San Diego as a result of all this. And so my hope is that part of our that as we move through this process, as each of you moves through the process on your own or with a partner, that you will begin to find those glimmers of answers about what did you gain from this. I want to just share a little art moment to sort of summarize this stage, and that is that there's a ceramic. My wife is a ceramicist, and she pointed out to me the other day that in the Japanese tradition, there is what's called, I have to look at this, kintsugi. Kintsugi is when a broken pot is fused back together. The pieces are fused back together using gold or silver to create a new, more beautiful art object. And I do believe that that's the way that we must look at this whole experience, because our brokenness is going to allow some light to shine through. That's just what our faith says. And so I'm now a big fan of finding pictures of kintsugi ceramics, because they are truly beautiful. And
I
in
love
doing so,
this.
it renews us in holding out that hope. Please go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. Thank you. I love that thought. And it just reminds me of so many things that the Lord has given us in Scripture that are along those same lines. One of my favorite passages is from Isaiah, and where the Lord says He gives beauty from ashes, and I think that we can see this kind of a pattern. I don't believe that any of our experiences are wasted in our lives and in the lives of other people. And so, as we work through a process of being able to name these things, to grieve the losses that need to be grieved, we can't shortcut that early part of it. That's a huge, huge, critical piece of this. But as we are able to move through that and become whole ourselves, I believe that part of the beauty that's going to emerge from this is going to be what happens in our broader community as a result of our being willing to weather all of this. I mean, I want to just give the biggest group hug right now to everybody that's here gathered. As cheesy as that sounds, I feel like we're the survivors. We did it. We kept on going, and it's time to bind up our wounds and to find that healing and allow ourselves to emerge. I love the word renew, because the word itself, I think, is a part of the clue of how we do this. So you have which is like, repeat, we do it, we return to something, and you have new. And so it makes me wonder how beautiful things will be that emerge in us and in our art and in our worship, as we hang on to the things that are foundational, but we allow them to flourish and be influenced by our circumstances and the context in which we're allowing ourselves to grow. I think it's going to be pretty beautiful.
Well, and we live in the world of beauty as musicians. And it's often, we've talked about the challenges of this time. We've talked about the trials of this time, but shining behind all of this is a lifetime of music making that we all have in our hip pockets. And I think it's time for us to pull out of our hip pockets the playful spirit, actually, and to recognize that we've already been healed by music. We've been changed and improved by our participation in the music making process. And that's what music ministry really is. It's time for us to minister to ourselves, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't want to jump the gun on you at all, but I love the next R in your list. If I can go ahead and just say
Please.
it, Chris. The
Yeah.
next R that you wrote in your article is the word replay. And I loved that concept. It got me thinking about how, just as humans in society, we are communal beings and we need one another, and how much that is wrapped up and tied up in art, and particularly in music making. I think of how our hearts are stirred when we hear certain music that we tie attachment or identity to. We hear a national anthem, or we hear a song from our alma mater, or we hear, something that we sang when we were kids and we were jump roping, and we immediately have a flood of memories, or a song that was played at our senior prom. Well, the same is true when we think about our church music, right? And so, as sacred musicians, as worship artists, I think this is a moment we need to remember this for ourselves, but also for our congregations. When you are at the bedside of someone who is moments away from stepping from this life into the next, the songs that come into your mind are the hymns of the faith. They're things that you may have sung as a child. They're things that you know without even looking it up. The words come pouring out. And these are things that have been tucked in many generations ago, and they've just been a part of us. And so I just encourage you, as a gift to your congregation, as you begin to gather again, give yourself and them the gift of that familiarity. We've had to deal with so much new in the last year. Every time we turn around, there's a new technology, there's a new restriction or a new policy or a new thing we've got to do or not do. And there is such a wonderful place for newness. I am all about that, learning new music, challenges, all of that stuff. But I'm just saying, as a person, as a human, there's a part of me that just wants to sit and not have to learn a new worship language, if you will, not have to learn a new musical language. I want to use the stuff that's already in there and communally lift that up together and have that thrill and that comfort. It's like wrapping an Afghan around and tucking yourself up in front of the fireplace with a cup of tea. I think we can give each other that gift as we replay it.
As we replay it. Well, I would say for me, the hardest step to replaying it is getting myself to sit down at the organ. I think I have experienced quite a bit of resistance, and I think that is the picture of despair. That I somehow really have to work through to remember my experiences, and I know that many people are resistant to actually taking a step into the healing process for fear that it might not work, for a lack of trust that music in truth, in beauty are universals that are available to us all the time. So I want to echo you in encouraging people to just take the step onto the organ bench and turn it on and play a favorite piece. So as we end this section, for lack of time, because we could clearly talk forever, I just would like to paraphrase one of the great sayings, which is, we're going to call it, this is the musician heal thyself stage. So we're almost out of time. There'll be a time in a few minutes for some questions and some dialogue. So if you have something, you feel free to ask the question now. But we want to just recognize that the sixth R is to acknowledge that however much work that we've done on ourselves, it's not all the work. And so it's important for us to recycle or to repeat this process so that when memory comes up, when one feels paralyzed, when one is in despair, that this process is always available. And it is a reliable way of helping yourself get through the tough times. Journaling, professional therapy, a friendly ear. Listening to yourself is the most important part about following the process in trust that we can literally be musicians who heal ourselves. And so having gone through the 6 steps, we're right on time, I believe. Elizabeth, are there questions that you'd like to raise? Has anybody written in?
There are some wonderful comments. One that I'm going to share. Thank you for including those who've lost their jobs. This is triggering some long pent-up tears. At 67, I decided I just couldn't emotionally manage the crisis ministry to frightened choir and colleagues, the extra work involved, though I am tech savvy, the loss of making the types of music I crave, on top of a serious health crisis. So I opted to retire after 16 years at this job and 35 years as an organist and choir director. Fortunately, I'm stable financially and I'm in a better health, that this is not the way I envisioned ending my career. So much grief and loss, but I continue to count my blessings. I'm doing my best to heal and ponder how I can now use my gifts and privilege to help this desperate world without the platform of leadership. And a thank you to you both. I think you've...
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I just want to stop really quickly. whoever that friend is, I hope you're still tuned in. And I just want to say from my heart, thank you. Thank you for your decades of ministry, for your gift of art. And I'm so sorry for you and for all of us who have loose ends. That's one of the losses we didn't name, but it is so real, and I'm so thankful you brought it to our attention. The ceremonies, the things, the parties, the acknowledgement. We lost all of that, and many of us have these loose ends hanging out there. And I want to encourage you, if you've got a few people in your life that, as you're able to, if you're past a health crisis, if you can gather some of your people and make a pot of tea and bake yourself some cupcakes or get some from the grocery, stop and acknowledge your beautiful ministry. Give yourself and your friends that gift. I would love for someone to do that for you, but I encourage you to take the moment to mark that and give yourself a concrete moment you can look back on and say, I finished this.
I want to add my own congratulations and thanks on top of Sally's, because I think that a 35-year career deserves a round of applause from everybody. Faithful service for such a long time in a very stable environment, I'm sure, but this is not the way we planned to end. I ended my career in a way that was unplanned as well. But I want to just share with you from my experience that Sally has indicated a road to recovery for you and for so many, which is to continue the relationships that you already have. Because you're not the leader anymore doesn't mean that you can't lead from behind, that you can't lead from the side, which is kind of how I've approached it. I sort of have a perpetual lunch on Thursdays. I take somebody out, whoever that is, whoever needs it. And I keep in touch with the people in my ministry, which is quite a large group of people. But I also walk alongside the present music ministers as a willing ear, as a sympathetic heart, as a word of encouragement. They all need it worse than we ever probably did, because they're the ones who are now leading in our place. And so please don't give up. People still need us, retired people, because we have emotional capacity, we have experience, and we have wisdom that needs to be passed on. And those people need our encouragement more than we will ever know.
This makes me think everything you've spoken about today is really part of the vision of the American Guild of Organists. It's to engage and support and uplift every organist. And we have the capacity to do this now. And we have started doing it. And there are just so many thank yous in the comments box. But I will just read one of them. Thank you all for this wonderful webinar. You've helped affirm that many of the things I have done this past 18 months has been on point. I've been affirmed by the pastoral leadership and the membership of the church, but it's good to hear this from other peers in the same boat. And another comment was, I was just saying to a group from my husband's church a week ago that there's been a blessing from the pandemic that is using technology to reach out into the community at large, the membership of the church, and to keep our internal groups connected. Pre-pandemic, we had struggled to figure out how to reach out more into the community. COVID pushed us right out there into the virtual, through the virtual door. So I think that's a great, great comment. And someone had asked to go over the 4 R's again, of the 6 R's of recovery, and we can do that, but you can also find it in the July issue of the American Organist magazine, because this is, Chris has written about this extensively and talks about the 6 R's. So I encourage you to read this article. We can certainly include it in the handouts. You can never read this too much, because I think you find something new every time. And just for me personally, I think what I have tried to do as I recover is to take a moment each day and be grateful for something, some little thing that I took for granted for before, that I realize now, looking through a different lens, I need to be so grateful for. So a lot has challenged us, but I think a lot has helped us as human beings to grow, most definitely. Any final parting words, Chris, Sally, anything else you'd like to add?
Sally?
I will just say that I know Chris and I both shared a couple of resources with Elizabeth that I know they're going to make magically available to all of you somehow in connection with this recording. So I hope that you'll keep your eyes open for that, because we included some links to some things that have helped us as we've thought about these topics, and maybe will spur your own thinking and give you avenues for further reflection as we close. And I also just feel so compelled to say this to you all. So I don't know who out there needs to hear this, but you never retire from being an artist. You are created in the image of God, and God is a creative God. He is an artist. And so you never are done creating. You're never done reflecting that artist. And I just want to lift you up and tell you that whether you have a title next to your name, whether you're earning a paycheck and related to your art, that doesn't matter. You are still an artist, and your art is valuable and necessary and a gift to the world.
And we want to give you the courage to, and the encouragement to affirm what Sally has just said. We are all called as artists in the image of our Lord. And in doing so, in affirming that, we will find our purpose. And so I would like to say, I think on behalf of all of us here who are panelists, we are grateful for you tuning in, because this webinar is our purpose. Our purpose is, each of us, is to minister to our beloved sacred musicians in ways that we know about, and in ways that we are still finding to be challenging. But everyone is an opportunity for service in his name.
Thank you so much, Sally and Chris. This has been such a rich discussion, and we're getting so many thank yous and comments. So this has resonated greatly with everyone who's attending this webinar. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to promote a couple of webinars that are coming up. Next Monday at 4 o'clock, I will be presenting a webinar for our chapter leaders called Indiana Jones and the Quest to Find Chapter Resources on the AGO website. So we're going to go on a treasure hunt together. Chris is laughing. Chris, you better come along for that.
I'll be there.
And we're going to find all the hidden gems that there's so much good content on our website, but sometimes it's just hard to navigate to it. And then on July 30th, Shannon Four, who specializes in acquisition, client acquisition. He has been in the travel industry for many years, as well as being a wonderful organist, is going to talk about growing your membership. So, because we're now in a different stage, we've come out into the light, but it's going to be a little different of how we reach out to people and how we grow our membership. So you can register for both of these under the education tab. There is a sub tab there called webinars, and everything coming up will be there. So thank you again to all. I want you to keep uplifting each other, and stay well, be well. Thank you, Chris and Sally, and to everyone. And we will see you very soon. Take care.
Bye.